but for now, this is just what we're doing. So we're on the computer with no mics and nothing. And this is just, we're going to be really 2007. It's raw and it's real and it's rugged is what it is. What's up, guys? Kendall Roosing here. Welcome back to another episode of Get a Grip. I am here with such a special guest today, Shelby Murphey. Now, Shelby is not only a multiple-time world champion, she's won the world 3 times, right?
Yeah.
3 times. And not only is she a multiple-time world champion, but she also just received her black belt on the podium after a flawless performance at the World Championships at the brown belt level. And she's going to be competing very soon here at black belt, opening up her new part of her career. She's a full-time instructor. She's been basically instructing since she was a child, really, for like a long
lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. A long time now here in Orange County, California, where we're filming today. And I'm very lucky because she is also a very good friend of mine. We've spent a long time together, trained together, even though we are about as far apart in weight class as you could possibly.
I was thinking about the other day. I'm like, wow, there's actually no bigger gap.
No, that's it.
I love it. It's perfect.
We are the open class queens when we train together. And it's funny because I always tell people that as a roosterweight, she's one of my most fun training partners because I cannot let off the gas, like not the physical gas, we're gonna throw her around, but like the mental gas of like being technical for 1 second or I'm gonna get beaten. She's incredible. So welcome. Hello.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy too. And one of the reasons I've been really wanting to have Shelby on the podcast or have you on the podcast is because it's really easy, I would say, to find people that are great at jiu-jitsu, but it's something that we talk about a lot where it's like the people that, our audience that are usually interested in listening to have a lot more going on than just jiu-jitsu. They're focusing a lot on personal growth. They're willing to talk about the struggles behind the scenes. And they're looking for, one thing, I don't know if it's still in your Instagram bio or not, but we've talked about it a lot as like using jiu-jitsu as an avenue to become not only a better version of yourself, but to put more energy and beauty out into the world in one way or another. And so that's why I'm so excited to have you on today.
Yeah, that is definitely, like, if you want to sum it up in a sentence, the whole thing that I'm trying to do.
I'm good at my job. What can I say?
You have to write my bios.
I'm ready. So we're going to I'm really excited because we're going to split your podcast up into 2 parts. We've already discussed this because Shelby and I have so much good stuff we want to talk about with you guys. And I'm so grateful to have her here for your time. You're about to be 20, right?
Yeah.
So super young, 19 years old, and one of the most fun minds that I have like a fun time talking to and exploring ideas with. And I know you guys are really, really going to connect. If you look at our Instagram, you will see so much really intricate, thought-provoking content that this podcast is going to be such a blessing to us. So that being said, we're going to split up into 2 parts, but the first thing we're going to start with today, so everyone can get to know you a little bit better, is the quick version of your life story.
All right. So I grew up, born and raised in Costa Mesa, California, which happens to be where Art of Jiu-Jitsu opened up. So I started training when I was 10, so that's like a little more down the line. But I just started going to school like normal. I went through elementary school. I went through the first year of middle school. Growing up, I was always just someone who a lot of different directions I wanted to go. Loved.
Not much has changed.
Not much has changed,
Yeah.
but I have chosen jiu-jitsu as like that pinpoint focus. But I would say a lot of my struggles growing up came from so many directions that I wanted to go all the time. When I was younger, I was doing a lot of different sports, but I was also very artistic. I was writing a lot. I did a lot of businesses. Like when I was like in my like elementary school, I'd say
entrepreneur from the get-go, right?
Lot. Yeah, like selling bracelets, making like necklaces, like always something. So I would say if I think about like my early years, that's just kind of like bouncing in a ton of different directions. That's kind of what I am, and I still am now. When I was 10, I started training jiu-jitsu. AOJ just opened like down the street from my house. I started jiu-jitsu and like day 1, I was like, it's done, it's over. I love this. But I started competing very soon after that, like 2 months after that. And it felt like for a few years that it was just set in stone. Like I loved jiu-jitsu and that was the biggest thing in my life. Around like 14, 15, like, you start to get like a teenager, a little bit angsty. Around that time I started homeschooling. I was having some like friendship problems like in school.
So is that why you homeschooled, not for jiu-jitsu or combo?
Yeah, so that's like a really interesting like distinction to make, because people always think that I started homeschooling to train more, but it was like I was actually like when I started homeschooling, I was training less than I ever had before.
Oh wow.
I had a part of my homeschooling was to think, oh, I can do the classes in the morning, but I was actually like so checked out of jiu-jitsu. Is that a path you would suggest for younger athletes, or do you think it comes with different challenges, like stepping out of school to be trained full time? I definitely think that, like, in an ideal world, I would like if I'm talking to a kid, like my kid, I would want them to, like, let's say my kid. I'm not going to talk about your kids, okay? My kid. I would want them to go through school, and if they make the decision that they want to go all in on jiu-jitsu, just have it be not from like external pressure, because it's really easy for a culture to be built around training as much as possible. But if there's anything I've realized, especially in the past like few months of me training, it's that more volume is not always better, and to think that you can only make it to a next level if you're homeschooling is just really limiting. But I loved it, and I would not change it for a second, because even though I started homeschooling just for more like social, like teenage girl reasons, pretty quickly it just turned into like I was just sent right back into jiu-jitsu, and that was like around like 16, and now I'm like almost 20, so it's been about like 4 years of just complete devotion, like complete dedication. But yeah, so if I was talking to a younger person, I think there's room for either of those options, but to think one option has more tied to it in terms of like being able to get a lot better faster, I mean, typically sure, but we don't really have to think of any of these things in absolutes. And I think, honestly, I think it's a little more interesting if we took a kid who is in school and challenged them to like
let's experiment. So if you want to volunteer for these experiments, Shelby and I will study you.
Yeah, and I'll vlog the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. And it's like when they have twins and they separate the twins and they put them in different environments. We'll do that with jiu-jitsu and we'll see what happens.
Even better, we have to find a pair of twins.
Yeah.
It can't just be one kid.
You can send an email and we'll check it out.
Kendall at this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually think it would be more interesting to challenge a child who still wants to be involved with school to say, okay, how can we get as good as possible at this with as few hours as possible? I think that's a really big skill that can be a little bit overlooked when very common in jiu-jitsu is the thought that it's always better to do more. And it's easy to get those things. I talked about this on my Instagram the other day, so it's like fresh in my mind, but it's easy to get the idea of like you want to be better and you want to do more, right? But it's like it doesn't always mean those two things are together, that more is the better. So but we as humans, we just want to generalize like as much as we can, so that we do that everywhere. It's not just a jiu-jitsu thing. But to challenge that, I think, is a really big skill to have, especially as a young person. And see where the intention needs to be, because that really, and I know we'll talk about this when we talk about your lead up to Worlds, but the battle or the challenge or the priority between mass, like growing the mass amounts of time that you're on the mats, versus really focusing in on the intention of what you're doing with your time and making that really, really effective. And so it doesn't feel to me that different than the person who wants to run an academy and win a world championship in the same year. Like Victor Hugo, for example, just who we've had on the podcast, and you should listen to this episode because it's really good. But Victor Hugo opened his academy and it's been open for a year. And at the end of the first year, won double gold at the world championships at the same time. And many people told him he wouldn't be able to do it because of the exact reason you're talking about, with time being the issue. And what he has said in response to that is like, it really has a lot more to do with what you are doing with your time. And I know that in my experience with injuries and stuff, having limited amounts of mat time available to me that my body could actually take really made me a much better athlete, because it made me get super hyper focused on what I was doing. I didn't have the luxury anymore of just doing more and doing everyday pojada. And I wanted a full, no offense, Hamala, I love you and I love your slogan, but I've had to make some adjustments with my life personally. And so like with wanting a big life and having injuries or whatever it is that you're dealing with, there are ways, and we need to be talking about that so that young athletes are coming up seeing like, oh, okay, I can do this.
and I can build a business, and I can have good relationships with my family, and I can go to school. You can do it all. And this romanticism that we've always had in the jiu-jitsu world and many other sports of more is better, and if you're not doing the most, then you're going to be last. It's outdated, you know. So, okay, back to your story. So you're homeschooled, you're training, and then you're competing, and then what happened next?
So I was training a lot, like around like 15, 16. I was very dedicated to jiu-jitsu, but I wasn't necessarily thinking that's what I wanted to do long term. Side note, I also graduated early when I was 16, so I started college a little bit earlier. So I was kind of at a point where I could decide to go all in on college, all in on jiu-jitsu, or a million other things that I like could set my sights on. But it was really during the COVID lockdowns when I was 17 that when I was forced out of jiu-jitsu and everyone was staying home, I'm talking like the very beginning, like the first 3 months, at least in California, after like 3-4 months, we were more open. I know in other places it wasn't like that, but really those first 3-4 months for us were like
April, May, June of 2020,
exactly, like nothing. And I was having a lot of thoughts about if I wanted to continue jiu-jitsu, how I wanted to continue jiu-jitsu from a career standpoint.
Had you just started college at that point?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was like you start college, you're able to do that, you're training full time, and then boom, the world closes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right before PANS too, so I was very excited like to do PANS. I was a juvenile. You think you know so much when you're like I know. Oh, my second juvenile year, whatever. It's so funny. It's so cute.
Imagine what you're gonna think about yourself when you're 30 or even 25.
Right?
You know.
It's crazy. Even like a year from now.
Even like in a month, we're going to be looking back at this podcast like, wow, we've changed so much. Like, but that's why I love spending time together, because I feel like we're constantly trying to look back and like, whoa, big expansion. So anyway, so the world closes and you can't do your second year of juvenile.
It's so funny you mentioned that super fast about with us, it's going to be like all over the place. All the time. But it's so funny you mentioned that about just like our kind of like rapid expansion. Because yesterday I was thinking to myself, like, wow, like, I feel like every week I'm a new person. Seriously, like, I feel like there's some new, like, this, like, crazy cycle. Like, I feel like people usually have cycles that, like, maybe last a few months. But for me, it's like, oh, every week I'm like, where are we going? And I think that's part of the reason why I love jiu-jitsu so much, because those cycles can be condensed into, like, a single round. And it just allows for so much growth. And that's just like one of my favorite things about jiu-jitsu. Anyway, if you were going to ask that. Now we know my favorite thing about jiu-jitsu. So world shut down. I was like forced off the mats. Like everyone was terrified. Like you're actually forced off the mats. And then I was doing whatever I could from the very beginning. In the very beginning, I was running every day. I was going to the gym. As soon as like 2-3 weeks went by, I was calling over my like 220-pound blue belt uncle to come train with me, and his friend who was staying with him, like these huge giant guys to come train with me so I could do something. I'm watching tape, like I'm doing everything I can, and then it's like 1-2 months later, some people are okay to train with me again, so I'm going to their garages. I was doing everything that I possibly could. And that was not because I had a tournament coming up that I had to train for, right? It was just because I loved what I was doing, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. So any confusion I had before that about what direction I wanted to take, that period of time totally solidified this is what I'm doing, because there's nothing at stake, and I'm dedicating everything I have to it when the world is shut down and somehow I'm still finding time, or like I'm finding ways to train like every day.
You learn a lot. Crazy. You learn so much about yourself when you're put in periods of desperation, or you're put in like when we have our normal routine and we're shaken out. I mean, everyone was shaken out of routine in COVID, but there are other events that shake us out of routine as well, like losing a job, ending a relationship, even moving in the same city from one apartment to the other, or whatever it is, like changing jiu-jitsu gyms or starting a new hobby. Anytime we're shaken out of routine, we're really given an opportunity to say like, what do we want to keep the same and what do we want to change and what really matters? Because we can say what matters and we can do what we think matters when we're in routine. When we're taken out of that, it's like you really do show yourself what you care about with your actions rather than your words, especially when it's difficult. So I think during COVID, a lot of people learned a lot about what really, really mattered to them. And it sounds like you definitely did.
Yeah, so that was the turning point. That was the shift. I didn't realize it at the time because I was not thinking of these things, I was just doing what was making me happy, and I was like finding ways to train and like just doing whatever I could, and that was just what was making me happy. It was not tied to any results, like it wasn't tied to any of that stuff. It wasn't even tied to like none of my teammates, coaches, none of them knew what I was doing, you know, like it was just like me with my giant uncle, like seriously, or trying to like, I would start to teach my parents in private lessons. They don't do jiu-jitsu. We bought these puzzle mats, and I would like try to teach them.
Because you had been teaching at that time already, right? You were helping with kids and stuff as a teenager.
Actually, no, like
not yet.
Very minimally.
Okay.
Like a few months.
Just okay, but you were newer to teaching, and so then you were still even like, if you know what's interesting to me about what you just said is I have a question, but also want to say like, when you think about teaching your parents, you found ways to not only hone yourself as a competitor, but also to hone your skills as a teacher, which really is interesting to me to hear, because I was really interested in, at that time, in training, and I was doing online stuff and I was doing content, but I didn't miss teaching in person at that time. And that was a good way for me to learn about what I actually love doing versus what, you know. So my question following that up is, what do you find, like when you talked about I wasn't doing it for these external reasons, I was doing it because it was making me happy, what would be your advice to people who feel like they're like you, or they have a lot, like, you know, they're good at a lot of stuff, they're pulled in a lot of directions, they're interested in a lot of things, and they're in these younger years or even in their older years and maybe have options to go into different transitions? How do you decide which path to go down? You know, where do you turn your energy to?
That was, like I said earlier, like definitely the biggest conflict of my entire
life.
My entire life. Even now, I still feel like I've chosen these directions. I've chosen the direction of competing, but just like I said, I'm so pulled to teaching. I'm so pulled to education, and sometimes I can feel that pull. But I know, and this just comes with a level of self-trust. And this is what I would say as my advice: get to the bottom level as low as you can go of who you are. Like, to me, I would like to say I am a creator. I love to create, so that's what makes me happy. So if I'm creating good jiu-jitsu in like a competitive setting, or I'm like creating different concepts to teach, like I am just a creator. And that's why, because I'm such a creator in a broad sense, like I want to create visually. Like I was really into photography, videography when I was younger. I want to create just like with writing, like there's like interpersonally with people, like there's just so many directions I'm pulled. But if I can just boil it down and realize I'm a creator, okay, that's one. So what are you? Like, I'm a creator and I love to create, and that's what makes me happy. But number two is there is infinite time to create. You are like, when I think of myself that way, I know that right now most of my creative energy is going towards becoming the best competitive jiu-jitsu practitioner that I can be. But I also know that just because that's what I'm doing right now, that doesn't mean that's what I need to, that needs to be the only outlet for the rest of my life. I'm 19. So if I could just sit back and trust myself and think, when I want to pivot to a different creative outlet, endeavor, whatever, I will. And I'm just going to let that come, and I'm not going to resist it when it comes. But more importantly than not resisting when it comes is not like being resistant to the idea of the switch. Like being
open to the flow.
Yeah, but also being okay with that this is the time that I'm spending right now, and I am happy here. So it's just like about rushing less. But back to the advice for someone who is like very open, very creative. You just pick, like what I did, you just pick one thing, and then if you get an overwhelming feeling that it's a no, then you back out. I went into, after that COVID experience, and then going all in on jiu-jitsu, right after that is when I started to teach. Right after that is when I started to win all the time, compete all the time. That was me just saying, I'm putting my hands up, I'm going all in, and then like if I did think, oh, this was the wrong decision, then I can just back out. You can always change your mind. And it takes a lot of courage too, because I think sometimes action is the hardest step forward. But if you trust yourself that you'll always figure out a way to land on your feet, which everybody is capable of doing, but that means like, okay, land on your feet as in, you know, get along, like find a group of people that you can vibe with in whatever area you're talking about, right? Or you financially support yourself, or
support yourself with like your own personal practices that keep you grounded no matter what career path you're taking or whatever it is. Like if you trust that you can always land on your feet, then the courage that it takes to try something new is a lot less scary, or to commit and put all your eggs in one basket and to try something, because then as you go through it, if you end up not enjoying it, you can change your mind. I think it's when people feel, and I have experienced this myself, when I have felt like I wasn't really sure if I would survive if I failed, then I was scared to commit, because it's like, well, if I commit, then I can't change my mind because I need to stay stuck here and I better keep doing this thing. And so if you build a life where you feel like you can land on your feet no matter what, then all of a sudden the courage to try different stuff is a lot easier to have, and you have the opportunity to pivot and switch. That's like my favorite phrase of my entire life. Like, you can always change your mind. You can always change your mind. Like, if I hated podcasting in a week, guess what? I would stop doing it. But I wouldn't know unless I tried doing it. And so the action and the courage that it takes is always worth it, because even if you end up changing your mind or doing something different, the lessons that you learn through the action, you can't learn through books. Are great, but you can't learn through reading a book. You can't learn through listening to a podcast. You're not going to have your own experience with this by hearing Shelby's experience with it. It's great for the information, but we have to be able to take the action ourselves, and that's the only way we'll get like the gold of the lessons to do it.
And it's really interesting hearing you say that, because when you just said that, I just hear it because we're talking about my younger self. I'm hearing it as if I'm listening to a podcast, and I'm hearing that being said, and it's like my gut, not now because I've grown so much, but just an insecure teenager is thinking, oh, I don't have the courage to do that, you know? And when I try to think about like, well, what was the shift? What was the change between thinking you do have the courage or thinking you don't to thinking you do have the courage? And I think it's not even about deciding to change if you believe in yourself. It's just about doing it while you don't believe, while you don't have the courage. And then
because you'll build it as you go.
Yeah, you'll build it as you go. But it's just funny to think that when I was younger, and what's crazy is my actions didn't even reflect that. It was just a narrative I was telling myself, like, oh, I'm too scared of that. But it's like, well, if I was looking at what I was doing every day, I wasn't even acting in alignment with someone afraid or not courageous, which just goes to show how important the words we say are to ourselves. And kind of what I'm coming to the conclusion to with you having me talk about my life is I'm someone who's always so action first, but stuck in some old like thought processes, that it's actually kind of like the opposite of what you might think, where like I'm acting, but then my head isn't catching up, and then it takes like, oh wait, look at me here.
Gotta integrate it a little bit. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to see, because a lot of times, like, I love when people talk about the concept of doing it scared or doing it anyway. Like, even if you feel the fear, you feel the feelings, because it's like the classic. It's like weightlifting is maybe a little different because you build up to it, but it's like the classic statement of, when you feel uncomfortable in somewhere you haven't been before, like you take the leap into the thing that feels uncomfortable, and then you grow into the person that can continue to handle it and expand their capacity for more. And then you take another leap and it feels scary and you don't necessarily have all the tools, but you build the tools on the way. It's like when they say like you jump off, I'm such a visual person, like you jump off the cliff, but you don't have the parachute open yet. And then like when you get to the appropriate level, okay, now I pull the thing and I have the parachute down. But if I jump off with the parachute on, first of all, I won't even be able to like open. I won't be able to get far enough out from the cliff in order to fall. I will swing back in from the wind and hit the cliff and probably die. So and it's not gonna be very much fun, right? So it's like you gotta take the leap and then you build the stuff along the way. But it goes back to like, once you get, in my experience, the more you do it, the easier it is to keep doing, because you build the faith in yourself that no matter what happens, you're going to figure it out. So the more risks you take, the more, like in my experience, like with injuries or the more adversity that you go through, not that you want to like have the adversity Olympics either, because I mean, oh my gosh, like we are so blessed and have so much. And so I think that's a dangerous route to go to. Like, look how hard I've had it. But I mean more choices that we're making. Like if I make choices to put myself in uncomfortable situations where I know I'm either going to have to gain some skills to survive, or I'm going to figure out that it's not for me and I can pivot, then it's going to be easier for me to do it next time.
Totally.
And that's where we get these week turnarounds, these 1 week turnarounds where I'm like, wow, I took some risks last week. Like I feel like a totally new person. And it's not that for me, I don't do that 24/7. We actually had a conversation recently. It's like, sometimes I actually have to I get a nudge, I get a gut feeling like, hey, or someone like, you know, really intelligent and smart in my life was like, hey, you know, like, I love you. I think maybe slow down for a second. And then I'm like, okay, I need to integrate whatever's been learned. I need to like stick to my routines, go back to the basics, self-care, like stick to routine. And then after I integrate that, then I can jump into being a little crazy again. But yeah, that's how you get those quick turnarounds.
Yeah, totally. I was meditating the other day, and I kind of had I was just like thinking about some things, and I kind of had a feeling or like a vision of that exact process, but kind of like through like the ocean. Wow. So like if you're like at the and this is like exactly what you're saying. So you'll see where I'm going with this.
Yes.
If you're at the shore, you look in front of you. I mean, we're around oceans all the time. I don't know how many people watching get to be right next to the ocean, but you guys have seen oceans, so it's fine. You'll get it. So you're at the shore, like you're on the sand, and you see like these waves are crashing. It's the whitewash, and that's like the hardest part to get into. But going into that is like going into adversity, right? So I'm on the shore, and I'm like going into like
head first.
Yeah. But then you get to a point where you're deep enough to where you're like before the waves are crashing, and they're still forming. So then you can kind of dive under them, and you're not feeling that impact. So then that's like getting a little more comfortable with the adversity, like overcoming it, expanding your awareness to fit that, which is what you were talking about. Yeah. But then there comes a point after that where you're actually after all the waves being formed, and you're just like chilling in the ocean. And that's where I would literally, I'll just float on my back up towards the sun, and that's just like the calm, right? So what you were just saying of like having those times where you are like gut feeling like, let's just calm down, like that's out there, you know?
Yeah. And it's then, earned, right? It's like earned through all of the getting there-ness.
Yeah. And then, so that's like more of like the calm you're talking about. But then the most fun part is when you're like, okay, now I'm going to test this. I'm going to ride the wave back in. And that's like some highs that we can experience when we're like deciding to do a big tournament, or like we have a big like shift in business, or like we're going to like teach a new camp, like all of those types of things. And that's like riding the wave in. And then like you're back to the shore. And then like you do it again.
I love it.
So that's
so good.
Yeah, like really similar to what you're talking about.
Perfect visual.
Yeah,
it's so good. Okay, so back to your I'm like, man, we're never gonna finish this life. This life story.
I don't even know.
I know. And you know what's funny is I realized I forgot to ask the get a grip question at the beginning, which I always am supposed to ask. But you know what, guys? We know what I don't do is I never. Well, I don't want to say never because I might do it in the future, but I almost never like cut and stop and re-record. So we're not gonna do it. We're gonna not put it at the beginning. It's just going to be at the end today, but we'll end with that. So before we do that though, we're going to go back to your life story. You're teaching, you're back because the schools are starting to open up a little bit more. You're winning everything. And then what happens?
Yeah. So I'll start like a little bit earlier than that. So like, let's say like the first day the gyms open back up. I've been training for like 3 months straight, pretty hard.
Yeah.
I'm going in, everyone around me, their calluses are gone. So like when they're training for the first time, like
they can't
hold the gi. They can't, like everyone's winded. Like no one's been training. Like no one's had the option to train, you know?
Yeah.
So I went back in that first day, and like I was used to like, like let's put on a gi, let's put the hair up, like you know, my fingers like were fine holding the grips. Like I was just like leaving, like had more energy than I came in. And it was that moment that I realized that it all just kind of came together, that it was like, oh, I love this and I'm gonna do this. So right when that happened,
I love this shit.
Exactly.
That's
my favorite video, like not just of you, like in general, like it's just perfect. The energy that you are conveying, and that just sums it all up. Like it's just like a little snapshot of like what it means to like be in this.
Yeah, so many people feel that. Like it's a video of me, but even when I've watched it back and been like, this is a universal experience for when people, from my perspective, when people are in their flow, like that feeling of, man, I love this shit. Like I'm so lucky to do this. This is where I'm meant to be right now. I'm so glad it was captured, because it's not just me that's felt like that. So it's so cool you related back to that moment.
Yeah. So then tournaments started up again. I was competing a lot. I was winning like almost everything.
Yeah.
And I would say like that whole period of, and then that turned into, IBJJF was back. So then PANS happened in September of that year. I won PANS at Blue Belt. And then I was like, and then Worlds was in December. It was a weird year.
Of 2020.
Yeah. So it was September PANS, and then, or 2021.
Okay.
September PANS, and then December Worlds. So I was going in Japan, won at blue belt, and then I was like, let's get my purple belt, let's do worlds at purple. And that whole experience was kind of like riding that wave back in of all that struggle coming in, and then out there like kind of in the calm, and then it's like, now let's ride it back in. And then I won worlds after like having my purple belt for like 3 months.
So crazy.
And then I did it again 6 months later because the schedule was weird. So worlds was in June. So I did
that's so weird.
So I won 2 titles in 6 months.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool. Like a lot of people like, I don't know.
It is
that's
cool.
Not something that's been, people don't do that because the schedule like doesn't allow for it.
Yeah.
And then so I won the 2 titles, and then after that there was definitely a lot more. When I got my brown belt, like then
right after Worlds, right?
I had to wait a few months because of like the rules.
Okay.
Back then, now they have a rule where
if you win the Worlds,
but they didn't have that before. So I got my brown belt like a few months later. Brown belt, the beginning was very rocky. Then I ended up winning Worlds again this year, and I got my black belt
on the podium.
And here we are. So
oh my gosh! So that's my life.
I feel like God,
I know.
That's my life.
We got it. We got the shot. So I think I want to ask you about your lead up to Worlds, because there was so much adversity. Like when people hear about your story to winning brown belt world and why you were able to step on the podium. You've talked a little bit about it on your Instagram, but I'm really excited for you to expand on the ability that you created for yourself to have the experience of going in as a champion and to win the worlds and to have a black belt put around your waist. That's going to be really moving, but I'm going to save it for the next episode because we're going to have to go deep on that one. And I want people to hear what I've heard, and I don't want to rush that. So you guys will have to tune in for the second episode. I'm sorry, not sorry, but it's worth the wait, I promise. But what I do want to ask you today is, I want to go back to that get a grip question. You are, obviously, I really relate to you in so many ways, and I know so many of our listeners do too, in that you are a multifaceted, strong, expansive, courageous, excited about life kind of a woman. You have so many avenues you could go down to expand your talents and to live a fulfilling life, which is a big blessing, but it's also a challenge, like we've talked about so much. And you are constantly looking to grow and to expand your skill sets while pursuing this, like we can call winning the world championships or being the best jiu-jitsu athlete in the world. If we call that a narrow goal, we have one narrowed in goal. One thing that you do really well is you also are constantly working on other little projects, right? Yeah. And projects as in like, yourself as a human Shelby, but in different arenas. So with all that being said, what does it mean to you to have a grip on your life? When you feel in the flow, when you feel like I've got it going on, what does life look like for you? And you can use a tangible answer, or it can be like, oh, I just feel like this, or it can be a little bit of both.
Yeah, so I actually have, like, this is going to sound like it's rehearsed. It's not rehearsed. When I walked in, like, today and, like, before we started filming, I remember that this is a question you asked. Like, I listened to your podcast. I know, like, this is a question that you asked. I remember, like, oh, she's going to ask the get a grip question. And then I spent a second thinking about it, and I was like, what I was journaling about last night actually perfectly answers this question. So I guess it is rehearsed.
Yes, we got lucky.
So me as a person, this is also going back to just what I was talking about right now with my life story. I'd say everything that I do and I say with a lot of conviction, and I really believe, and I'm very tied to my mission. I'm mission oriented. I'm passion driven, and so when I explain my life story, some of what I'm about to say kind of ties in. But I am always like, so there's two extremes. Like when we are human, there's two ends of being human, where on one end we have unlimited possibilities, just like I was talking about, choosing where you want to narrow in at, just where you want to live. Like, I can't even get into it. We have unlimited possibilities, opportunities. Like, we can
infinite. It's just, you can make an infinite combination of choices, right?
Yeah. So that's one end of like super creative. Like, it's unlimited. It's infinite. And then on the other end, we have limited resources. There's time, there's there's decay of like our actual bodies. Like I'm not gonna be 19 forever. Like one day I'll be 85, you know, like, but yeah. And then also like in time, which time is one that I like to try to steer away from because I can get really caught up in time. So like I like to think of time more unlimited also, but like there is limited time, obviously.
Yeah.
And that scarcity is so beautiful. And I can see both of those extremes, and it's so easy for me to go to either one with my decision making and with just the way that I'm perceiving the world, because my decision making is not, I don't keep it at extremes. Like I'm rational, like in my decisions. But with my perception of the world, and I'd say smaller scale decisions, I can very easily swing to, wow, we have unlimited possibilities. And then on the other end, I can swing to, we have limited resources. So if I can make any decision, and by decision, I mean something as small as a thought, right? Because if I'm going through life and I have a thought and I'm acting in alignment with that thought, that's a decision that I'm making, right? So as small as a thought, as big as like changing my life, right? Like going all in on jiu-jitsu or something. If any decision that I make with both of those extremes in my mind, like is this decision backed on both ends? Could I say this is a decision backed in my belief of unlimited possibilities? Can I also say that this is also a decision that is grounded in the fact that
the 3D world that we live in,
to be human is scarcity, and the scarcity is what's beautiful. And I know if I'm making decisions acknowledging the beauty of both of those things in like an equal-ish way, then I'm having like a good grip on my life.
That is so good, and actually gives me a lot to think about, because
I'll send you my
send me your journal entry. We're personal here, like that and getting rid. No, but it really is so, like, I talk about this concept a lot of being, like, we've talked about this too, being so black and white, and not like committing to that thought like, oh, I'm black and white, but acknowledging that I kind of came wired that way. No one did it to me. It wasn't like I wasn't, whatever. I just came wired that way. And so I'm very in extremes naturally. So I view part of my job, my mission, basically what you said, but you said it so much more eloquently, of like, how can I land in the middle a lot of the times of the black and white? But I love the concept specifically of because a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, for people who are super plugged in to the way, like to having this kind of wiring, it's probably going to make a lot of sense. People that are wired a little differently, it may seem a little bit like out there and like not as tangible, right? So I want to bring it back to being a little tangible because again, that like there's so much value I can glean from listening to people who are super tangible by nature. But because I can be really out there, I know that sometimes I need to bring it back. So bringing it back to like what you said was really extremely tangible for me in a very helpful way, where it's like, if I look at a decision, like if I'm going to move, right, just make that super, super tangible. I'm going to move cities. Can I say that that decision is supported by the idea that there are infinite possibilities and that there are no limits on what I can do as a person? And at the same time, is it also grounded and supported in the idea that we have limited time, limited money, limited energy? Obviously, we think that we can expand all those. Yeah. I think that I can expand all those things.
Exactly, and that's why the second I have that thought, then that's when it starts to go to, well, there's unlimited possibilities, right? So
exactly. So can it be supported by both? Exactly. So can it be supported? And you can literally write this down, like going to some actionable things for people to take away from this. Like if you're having trouble making a big decision or a small decision, or if you're trying to decide like, what do I want to rewire my thoughts to be? What are if you're into affirmations, what is that going to be? What kind of techniques do I want to work on in training? Like as simple and as small of a decision as that. Can I write it down and have it be backed by both of these concepts if I believe that both of these concepts are really important to me in the world that I live in? So I'm so glad that you said that. That was really helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah. Good. So we are going to have to come back for a part 2. Before we do that, though, I did want to let you guys know, because this will be out before our camp, that Shelby and I are going to be, well, it's Camp Kendall, but I have Shelby and it's Kendall and friends. I have Shelby, I have my sister Emma, and I have our other amazing friend who we were just with last week, Emily Hayden. we are facilitating an amazing camp in Vancouver, Canada called Jits and Eats. The link is in my bio on all my platforms, on Instagram mainly. That's the easiest way to find it. But it's a women's jiu-jitsu camp. It's 3 days. We're going to eat. We're going to hike. We're going to do a lot of jiu-jitsu. Trust me. We're going to play games. There's like slumber parties. We're all staying in the Airbnb. It's basically going to be a big party with some jiu-jitsu. And I'm really excited about it because it's going to, in what I'm envisioning for it and facilitating this, and what my goal is going to be coming into this camp is how can we create more connection with women inside jiu-jitsu, because sometimes it's hard to find our like BJJ BFFs, you know, like we don't all like, we've built a friendship over a long period of time, but like I don't have tons of friends like Shelby inside jiu-jitsu and many other people that I can name. And whenever I get to connect with more jiu-jitsu women, I know that I greatly benefit. And so being able to facilitate a space where we can do that is going to be the coolest. I'm super excited. Wait. Yeah. So if you guys are listening to this before, it's the weekend of July 15th. So if you're listening to this before then, we have a couple spots left. Make sure you guys click the link in my bio and check that out for ladies. But other than that, I'm so glad that you guys tuned in today. Shelby, I'm so grateful for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And your mind. It's just so great to jam with you on all these things that we like to explore together. And I know that if you guys enjoyed Shelby's podcast and you don't already follow her, wow, that was really aggressive the way I pointed at the camera if you're watching on YouTube. And know that if you enjoyed this, you guys, and you don't already follow her, you will love her Instagram. Make sure you guys, it's just Shelby Murphey or something. JJ. Yeah. So Shelby Murphey, JJ, I'll link all this stuff in the description so you guys can click on the link and follow her there. Check out her content is what I'm trying to say. The videos are really interesting. She spends like a lot of time going into detail on creating these very educational videos, something that I have never been brave enough to do with my social media as far as the time consumption like that she dedicates to it. And that is her forte. She's an excellent teacher. One of them, honestly, like I don't know if in the future things will change because you're so young and an up and comer. You're not as well known as one of the best teachers in jiu-jitsu as I think that this is just Kendall's opinion, but as I think you will become as your career continues, because the way that you teach and the way that you articulate ideas in a way where people can pick up what you're saying and then immediately apply it into their game is really unique. And it's very fascinating to me to watch. So if you guys have not followed her on Instagram yet, make sure you guys go there, start watching her stuff. It's all consumable, free content that you will really benefit from, and it's really special. So yeah, follow along with her stuff. If you guys enjoyed the podcast or found value from it, make sure you guys leave a review, send it to somebody. The best thing for the podcast is if you send the podcast to people or share it on your Instagram story, or send the link to people, review it, all that stuff. And I greatly appreciate it because I love doing this project. And the goal with it is to just continue to grow it and have amazing guests on like Shelby. So until next time, guys, you'll wait till part 2. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Get a Grip, and we will see you again soon.